Okay, hoping to put together a demonstration video of how to cleanly remove Aries and Teamspeak as cleanly as possible and reinstall them with the correct settings, and then configure your joystick and Aries settings, including your Aries quality settings, and then to create a mod for JSGME that will allow you to preserve your joystick and audio quality settings in case you need to uninstall or reinstall Aries, Teamspeak, or even your entire operating system. So first, uninstalling Aries is where we'll start. Now the reason we're doing this, of course, is because we are having stability issues with Aries, and so we want to have an installation that's as clean as possible. So the proper way to uninstall Aries is, of course, first into the control panel programs menu. I am on Windows 8.1. This should look the same on Windows 7 and Windows 8. If it doesn't, your control panel may just have a different view, for example, but again, you should know where your programs menu is. And effectively, the AB radio, we're going to uninstall it. This is a pretty straightforward process. Now, once we've uninstalled Aries, we now need to go and delete all of the places it's resident, and it's going to be in a couple locations. First, let's look for where Aries actually installs, which is inside of your DCS World game folder. My computer, I use the default locations, so that's going to be here. Program files, Eagle Dynamics, DCS World, Aries Wings. We're just going to right click and completely blow that away. Sorry, I just want to ignore this. I'm deleting that to make a point. Okay, so we've now deleted the Aries installation directory. The next thing we want to do is check the Teamspeak installation directory. Now in this demonstration, I'm going to be uninstalling Teamspeak as well, but in case you're only doing Aries in the future, this is effectively the place you should look to make sure Aries is really gone. Inside of the plugins directory, there is an Aries radio log directory, and the actual Aries plugin is usually here in this list, so that was removed. For cleanliness, we're going to go ahead and delete the log directory as well. In some uninstallations, I've noticed that the DLL stays resident. So that could be because you have things opened and you're not closing them properly. So you just want to come in here and delete the Aries radio DLL if it's present here. Okay, so Aries is now removed from Teamspeak. The next thing we want to do is we want to remove it from the export Lua. The export Lua is in your saved games directory, which is usually, by default, see users, your username, saved games, DCS, scripts, and then you hear your export Lua. Now I'm going to edit this with Notepad. You should understand, unless you're very familiar with text editors, you should only be using Notepad++ to edit your DCS Lua files. So here you can see is where Aries is referenced. By the way, this is where Aries connects to DCS. So there are really three programs we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with DCS, we're dealing with Teamspeak, and we're dealing with Aries. Teamspeak and Aries connect through that plugins folder that I just showed you. And Aries and DCS connect through the export Lua. So we're going to delete this. We're going to come back to this file later to show you how Aries gets disconnected when it's installed properly. We're going to save that. So Aries is completely cleaned up from all of our files. The only remaining reference of Aries is going to be in our registry. So we're going to want to delete this from the registry as well. Here's where we do that. Windows 8, from my run command, I just type regedit. And we want to go to local machine. Now, of course, you need to have administrator privileges to do this. Software. And Aries should be in two locations, basically right under software, there's this Aries Wing directory. Right click, delete it. The next place and the most important place to delete it from is the following. Scrolling down a bit, WoW 6432 node, we're going to have Aries Wing here. We're going to want to delete this as well. At this point, Aries is completely removed from our system. Now in this case, we're going to uninstall Teamspeak as well. The reason we're uninstalling Teamspeak is not because it in of itself is a problem, but it's likely we didn't install it with administrator privileges. This is different from simply setting the shortcut to run with administrator privileges here. I'm suggesting that you may not have installed Teamspeak, as many people don't, with administrator privileges. That's why we're uninstalling it. Now, when we uninstall Teamspeak, we want to preserve our configuration files. Let me show you what I mean. So back to our Programs menu. We're going to uninstall Teamspeak. Teamspeak is asking us to delete configuration. Now, so for those of you who've had tremendous amount of problems with your Aries, you tend to think, well, let me just get rid of everything and do it clean. This is a massive mistake. Do not delete your Teamspeak configuration. This is what preserves your bookmarks. It's what preserves your identity in Teamspeak. And I can assure you it is not related to any Aries problems you're having. I've been using Teamspeak for over 4 years. I have never seen the user configuration files cause an issue. I highly doubt this is related to any problem you're having. And you're really just creating a headache for yourself and for the administrators of the Teamspeak server who have to go and recreate your permissions. So what do I mean by that? If I just launch Teamspeak here, your bookmarks, now I have multiple Teamspeak servers I connect to, so your bookmarks are a part of your configuration settings. If I actually connect to the 476 server, and you click on my name, you'll notice that my permissions here are set to normal. An administrator in the 476 gave me normal permissions, which, sparing you a lot of the gory detail, is the set of rights that I have within Teamspeak. And these are very important. If I delete my configuration, or if I reinstall Windows and I didn't back up my Teamspeak configuration, then all that stuff's going to have to be redone. I'm going to have to recreate my bookmarks, and it's really a pain in the butt. Don't do that. Preserve those settings. So I'm not going to check that. I'm going to go ahead and uninstall. And just like Aries, we want to make sure that we delete the actual Teamspeak installation directory. Now in my case, it has been removed. If you find it in the Programs file menu, delete it. Okay, now just going back to the point I was making about your configuration files, when you install Teamspeak, it will prompt you for where those configuration files are, your user configuration files. By default, Teamspeak will want to create it in your app data directory. Let me show you where that is. It's in C, Users, your username, and you'll see this folder called App Data. Now, if you go into your user's username directory and you don't see this, that's because your view is hiding certain things. So you'll have to unhide it. So here, I click the View button, Show Hide, and you'll notice I have hidden items checked, which is why I see it. If I uncheck it, a bunch of stuff here disappears. So I'm going to show it so that I can edit it. So in App Data, Roaming, scrolling down, here is my TS3, my Teamspeak user configuration files. Again, this is your bookmarks and this is your identity. So if you were actually reinstalling Windows altogether, right? You got a new computer, you're updating, you want to back this up off of your old computer so that you can copy it into this location when you're done. And that way when you're installing Teamspeak, it will reference this and all of your bookmarks and your identity, that will all be saved. There is no reason to not preserve this. Always preserve this directory. Okay, So now we can proceed with reinstalling Teamspeak. So I have my Teamspeak installer in this folder here. I'm going to right-click Run as Administrator. This is for the installation of Teamspeak. Very important. Now, most of you will think it's not important because you install it and it works. I assure you this is an essential step, especially when dealing with plugins as sensitive as the Aries Wings radio. I tend to install things in the default directories. It's totally fine if you're not. That's not your problem if you're having an issue, unless you've got weird permission issues on your C drive. So this is where your user settings comes in. So again, I leave mine in my user files. That's that directory I just showed you, that app data folder. If you were to click this button, it would put your configuration files where Teamspeak is installed. And so if you uninstall Teamspeak, you're going to wipe out that directory unless you go in and preserve it. So I choose not to do that, and I like to leave it in the default directory. Do not install Overwolf. It does cause problems with plugins to Teamspeak. We're going to go ahead and run our Teamspeak client, and you will see that my bookmarks are preserved. And if I connect to the 476 server, you will notice that my permissions are preserved as well. Okay, so Teamspeak is set. The only thing we need to do now is make sure that our shortcut is running with administrator privileges as well. And you can see that mine is. If yours is not, that doesn't mean you did something wrong. Just check that box, click Change Settings for all users, and check this. Because depending on the context that you're running Teamspeak in, it might be running under a different user context. Just make sure that both of these are set. You're good to go with Teamspeak. Now let's proceed to installing Aries. So here, I've got Aries in this directory. Once again, always right-click, Run as Administrator. The actual installation of Aries is very simple. It's the configuration that you need to be careful with. So please follow my instructions. If you have the beta of DCS World, it's totally fine to do that. If you're using GossipBox, it's totally fine to do that. I am doing both of those things, so I will install both. If you don't have those things, there is no issue with you leaving those boxes unchecked. Again, I am using the default directories for DCS, so I don't need to change anything. If you're not using the default installation directories, the Aries installer should find your location if your registry is clean. So that should actually be pointing to your location. If it's not, simply follow the browser to point to your DCS World installation and your saved games location. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do next here. Agree. So couldn't have been simpler. That is all set now. Now, the thing that most people do next is they go right into the Aries configurator. Do not go into the Aries configurator. Launch Teamspeak next. So here's my Teamspeak shortcut. And what you should notice in your settings menu, plugins, the following three things are checked. Aries Radio, App Scanner, Client Query. Now, for those of you who have G15s, you'll know if you need to enable this. If you don't know what this is, you don't have a G15, ignore it. If any of these checkboxes are unchecked, that's okay. Check them. Now that those are checked, we should have this plugin Aries Radio menu. Notice that radio's communication quality is grayed out. This only becomes available when the following two things are true. We are in the SIM, and we are connected to a Teamspeak server like the 476 server. So even if I go into the SIM, if I'm not actually connected to a server, that menu will not be available. We're going to come back to that menu. What I want to show you is how Aries connects to DCS using this little export Lua enabler and disabler. By default, we should be connected. If you're not, that's okay. Click the connect button and you should see this says Aries Wings is connected. What do we mean by connected? remember earlier I showed you in your saved games folder, so we'll go back there now, C, users, our export Lua. If I edit this, now because we've reinstalled, Aries recreated this line. This line is active right now. If I unclick that and we disconnect, and I reload this, notice it has 2 dashes, which means it's commented out, so it is not active. This is how you turn off Aries. If you ever want to go into DCS without the Aries panel loading, or you want to fly a free flight without Aries, this is the proper way to do it. The other way to do it is to come into the export Lua and manually type these yourself. That's totally fine. You can do that. What you should not do is go into the plugins menu and uncheck the Aries plugin. That is very heavy-handed and will likely lead to problems. People tend to forget to check it. They do it mid-mission. I've seen all sorts of issues. Don't do that. There's no reason with Aries for you to edit the plugins. Even when uninstalling, you don't need to come in here. Uninstall it. The DLL will be removed. If you want to turn off Aries, the proper way is to use this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and connect it and just click that. And again, you'll notice that it's clean again. Okay, now that we know things are working with Aries, what we'll do next is we'll actually configure Aries. What we want to do is we want to launch the configurator, and you'll notice that the configurator has some default settings in it. Now, what I want to show you is what this configurator is actually doing. This is important because it is essential that you set your audio quality settings fine. Okay, and so there are 2 types of settings that you really want to be concerned about when it comes to Aries. One is your joysticks configuration, and the other is the audio quality settings. So when I'm using this GUI to edit Aries for my push to talk buttons, it's actually editing the following file. So in my C directory, I'm going to go into the Aries installation folder, which is in Program Files, Eagle Dynamics, DCS World, so it's inside the DCS World directory, Aries Wings, and this file here, the Aries Airborne Radio INI. This is the file that gets edited, so we're going to open it with Notepad++ when we make changes to the Aries configurator. So for example, right up here at the top, push to talk box 1, that's this setting, and you can see by default it's my Warthogs button number 3, and that's what it is. So if I change this here, say I make it 2, and I just click that. Well, I got to save it first, of course. And I click this. Notice that changed to button number 2. Because again, what you do here is being written to this file. Why is that important? Because we're going to save that file. We're going to back that file up so we can change the audio settings. So the first thing I'm going to do is quickly set my joysticks. So let's do that. So I, of course, want my front radio forward, and I use my right ear for my front radio. I use both ears for my left and, for my mid radio, my uniform radio, and I use my left ear for my aft radio. So if you're not familiar with Aries, when this box is up that way, so these are depressed, that means I'm using the R, not the L. So both of these are depressed, and this one is up, non-pressed. So in this case, I won't hear sound out of my right ear. This is the most common configuration. This is personal preference. This means that when I'm in the A10, that if someone talks to me on the front radio, I should hear them out of my left ear. If someone talks to me on the mid radio or the uniform radio, I'll hear them out of both ears. And if someone talks to me on the aft radio, I'll only hear them out of my left ear. Okay, which is my desired settings, and most members in the 476 uses this. I like my hide radio. So this is to hide this GUI that shows when you're running Aries. That's my mic switch up, and I disable that. Okay, these are my preferred joystick settings. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. You may have other settings you configure here as well. So all of those are now configured in this INI file. Let me show you one other thing about the INI file, and this is very important. It is the audio quality settings of Aries. So if I scroll down here, these are the default audio quality setting of Aries. Now, at present, as of version 1.973, the audio degradation feature, which attempts to make Aries sound realistic, it adds the radio effect, it also adds things like terrain masking and sort of the horizon effect. All of that comes into play. That stuff's pretty bugged right now for a combination of reasons that I won't get into here. So by default, these are the values that Aries is going to read. And in fact, I want to illustrate this to you because notice that all this shows under sound mod is AM, VHF, AM, UHF, and FM, right? 786. And notice there's no background setting here. So when we first launch, let me get onto server. Okay. Again, you'll notice my radio's communication quality menu is not active. I'm going to quickly launch into single player. You're probably seeing a black screen through some of the windows as that doesn't render. But once I get into the sim, that menu will become active, and we'll change those settings. So just a few seconds here. Feel free to skip ahead. All right, let me just set my plane here to autopilot, and let's get Teamspeak back up. Okay, so now you'll notice this menu is available. Let's talk about what this setting does. So remember I showed you earlier the 7, 8, and 6 value. They are loaded from that INI file. Now again, as I mentioned, some of these effects are bugged, so currently in the 476 we don't use them at all. Let me explain to you by what I mean by effects. If you and I join a server and you hear me crystal clear and I say I hear you garbled, that does not mean my settings are the problems. It means you did not change your audio quality settings. In other words, what you change on your side affects what I hear, not what you hear. So we all want to be considerate of each other and set our audio quality settings so that everyone is hearing each other as clearly as possible. Again, that is until further notice when the Aries degradation features are a bit more stable. So the background strength value does not exist until the first time you come in and mess with it. Now, if we actually are flying a mission, I can actually change your settings and everyone who's flying with us, right? I can take over this game master mode and I can change the settings here for myself, right? So to affect what other people are hearing. So I'm going to turn that all the way up. And then I can send it to everyone in the channel. The problem is that unlike the joystick configuration GUI, this GUI does not save in the INI file. Actually, the background strength value does, but that's the only one. These other quality settings, you'll see when I'm out of it, those 10s, it'll still be showing 786, but the background strength will be present. So what we want to do is we want to go edit that INI file. Okay, so in fact, I'm going to turn this down to 2 to illustrate the point when I come back in. Okay, so let's go ahead and exit. So let's get to our INI file. So here we are, scrolling back down to the sound mod. Okay, and notice even though I set it as 222, I think at the end there, right? It's still defaulted to 786. Those settings do not get saved when you exit. But the background strength value is now there. If you go back earlier in the video and I was showing you this, you'll notice it didn't exist. So to get that value there, you go into that radio quality and you set it. And then just leave it at 100 or the 1 value. So I'm going to change these values to 10. Now some of you may have downloaded a mod that Eddie created that has these values set. It is better to do what I'm showing you here because you can also preserve your own joystick settings. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So now we've got everything set properly. There's nothing else to do. I'm going to save this file. So again, to make sure you're with me, I am in C, Program Files, Eagle Dynamics, DCS World, Aries Wings. This is the default location. You know if you installed it somewhere else. So this file now has everything I want in it. Now we want to create a JSGME mod with it. And the reason we're doing this is because it has my own joystick settings, not Eddie's. Eddie may have set his joystick entirely different than the way that I did. So I don't want Eddie's settings, right? I want his sound settings, but not his joystick settings. So instead, I'll edit this file myself. I don't need to download that file from the 476. I will copy this. I will go into my JSGME mods directory. Now by default, that should be in your Eagle Dynamics, DCS World, underscore mods is what most people name it. So I'm just going to create a folder here. I'm going to call it Dojo's Aries Settings. And go inside that folder. And then I'm going to create an Aries Wings directory. Now this must be named identically because we're basically overriding that INI file. So Aries Wings. So this must have the same name. Again, just to illustrate, I'm going to go back up to where Aries is actually installed. So inside my C programs files, Eagle Dynamics DCS World, Aries Wings. So in my mods folder, I created a folder. So you'll call this, if this was Recon, I'd call this Recon's Aries Settings or whatever you want to name it. That's fine. But this folder, again, must be named accurately. So in here, I'm now going to paste that INI file. So this is my settings, right? This is my joystick settings, my audio quality settings. So what did that buy me? Why did I do that? If I now open JSGME, you're actually going to see that mod. It'll appear there. And if I want to enable it, so enable my joystick and audio settings, I just do that. So the point is, if I uninstall and reinstall Aries, I don't ever have to do that again. All I need to do is come into my mod, just like any other mod, and enable it. So hopefully this helps you with any Aries problems you're having, any configuration issues you're having. Everyone should follow these steps first before reaching out to anyone for help. If you follow these steps and you're still having issues, there could be something specific to your security settings or any of the dozens of other programs you have running. But what I showed you in this video is what's accomplished the most stability. Now, yes, there are certain members who didn't have to do all of this and they're totally fine. But if you are having problems, I recommend that you follow the steps in this video. This has been Dojo for the 476.